Hi, good afternoon, good morning. This is Paul Lockhart with another Passageways webinar. I hope that you all are having a great day so far, and we have a great topic. This is one today that I think we can all very quickly relate to. Today we're going to be talking about embracing meeting productivity tools across your organization. You know, meetings, I don't think there's anybody who thinks that we have too few meetings, right? But they're necessary and they're not going away. So today what we're going to do is have a conversation around how can we get more out of them and how can we use some of the current technology to do that. Rather than hearing from me though today, we're going to have a discussion with someone who's actually improved productivity and effectiveness of meetings. And our guest today is Mr. Chad Smith. Chad, welcome to the broadcast. He is Vice President at Grand Bank of Texas. It's located in Grand Prairie. So Chad, why don't you tell us first where Grand Prairie is and then tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to Grand Bank of Texas.
Well, Grand Bank of Texas is headquartered in Grand Prairie, which is essentially directly between Dallas and Fort Worth, Texas, which everyone knows where that is. And we do have branches in Dallas as well as down towards the Austin area. And a little bit of my background is I manage mostly the information technology, the data processing side of the world, as well as operations and some of the cash management features and functions that we do here at the bank. And, you know, we've recently, become a Passageways customer and just looking forward to continuing that relationship. And I think this is a great topic. As you mentioned, everybody can kind of relate to it, and everybody's looking for tools and ways of doing things to make themselves more efficient and make their company more efficient. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing today.
Oh, well, that's great. I think to your list of accomplishments and roles, I'd call you meeting productivity guru. Everybody, Chad and I did have a previous conversation to prepare a little bit for today. And they're really doing some interesting things with technology, and I'm going to jump right into that. So when we had our discussion, Chad, you talked about three technology tools that you are using in your bank, and we'll talk a little bit more about what committees and organizations and teams are using the tools, but three primary tools you're using across the bank. And those are on the screen now for everybody to see. So can you kind of talk through each of them a little bit, how those are being used within meetings at Grand Bank?
You bet. The first one you see there is LifeSize, which a lot of people are familiar with LifeSize. It's a Logitech company, which is obviously a very, very large company. They have a lot of tools that people are used to using. The main thing we do with LifeSize is that is our video conferencing system, and that goes everything from the boardroom systems that we use for a lot of our committee meetings all the way down to the desktop level with, you know, the smaller webcams, one-on-one conversations that you can do, as well as chat features and things like that. We've really, began using that about 4 years ago, and it's really become an integral part of our institution and the way we do things. The next thing you see listed there is SharePoint. We use that essentially for mostly a document repository and being able to share documents and notes and things like that across the organization to keep everyone on the same track. We use it for keeping up with our policies and procedures and all of that as well. And the last one, of course, is OnBoard, which everyone on this call is probably familiar with, but if they're not, it's essentially a way to organize your meetings and try and keep them on track and productive, and just basically allowing yourself to be paperless as much as possible. And that's one of the things that we've really strived for over the last 3 to 4 years, is getting rid of as much paper as we can for multiple reasons.
So I had a quick question there. We didn't talk about this, so I'm going to put you on the spot, but it's something that I've heard at different conferences when I talk to people in the financial industry. So when you start moving digital, do you have any special process or policies when you use technology around digitization of documents in terms of kind of legal archival restrictions and regulations?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it translates. Essentially, you know, the retention periods for most things remains the same. The biggest thing is determining how you're going to abide by those. and a lot of those things are best practices, so it's kind of up to the institution on how they want to address that. If you may only be required to keep something for 2 years, but as an institution you can say, well, we're going to keep it for 4 years or whatever the case may be. So it's really a customizable option for most institutions. There are some things that from a legal perspective you want to protect yourself and not keep longer than you have to. I'll throw out the normal disclaimer that I'm not legal counsel and anything I say should not be taken as such. But you know, there are some things that you do want to make sure you have policies and procedures in place to not keep documents longer than needed, strictly because if you do have them, you do have to produce them, and sometimes that is something that you just want to protect yourself from. But essentially, that's the main hurdle you're going to see is being able to keep those retention policies along the same lines as when you had paper documents.
Okay, perfect. Makes perfect sense to me. So in regards to those tools, you described them at a high level, but I'm going to ask you to go a little bit deeper. And if you could talk about some of the benefits to your different teams and organizations and committees that are using them. So, you know, you talked about LifeSize being a video teleconference solution. What advantage does that give your committees and teams that they wouldn't have without that tool?
Well, our bank is, again, as I mentioned, we're kind of in the North Texas area and what we call the Hill Country, down towards the Austin area in Marble Falls and Horseshoe Bay. And we actually have directors and board members and shareholders in both of those markets. And as everyone can attest, it's usually much easier and much more effective when you're able to essentially be in the same place for meetings and things like that. Well, LifeSize has allowed us to virtually be in the same room with one another, because you can see, as you and I mentioned, you know, in our previous conversation, you can see facial expressions. You can more clearly understand what people are talking about if they can show you something, or you know, just seeing mannerisms and things like that. So it's definitely helped communication and, you know, collaboration as well. As far as moving on down through the list you have listed there, agenda driven, that's primarily the OnBoard piece. OnBoard really does a great job of keeping us on point. You're able to outline things, you know, just like you would on a paper agenda, and keep things moving, and even put those estimated times that you think you would use for each of the agenda items, so you know, okay, it looks like this meeting is going to be a little longer. You can either cut the meeting down and change some of those agenda items to another meeting, or you have the ability to let your people know, okay, you might want to schedule an extra 15-20 minutes for this meeting so we can knock out a few more things. But OnBoard's great for being able to keep you on track, but also kind of plan ahead. And that goes down to the preparation and document sharing pieces, where a lot of times what would happen previous to OnBoard is we would have each individual kind of stockpiling things throughout the month, and then they would, you know, within that allotted time when they're supposed to turn in their board materials, they would take their stack and give it to whoever was preparing the overall board packet or committee packet, and then it would all have to be gone through. It's really saved us a lot of time with OnBoard, because people, as you get a report or as you get some type of document, you can immediately put it in OnBoard for the next meeting. So there's no question about where it is. Oh, wait, did I include that? Did I not? Is it in this pile of 50 pages of paper or not? It's really helped with organization, and it keeps everyone on the same track, because anyone from our CFO to, you know, the person preparing the document itself knows, yes, that was uploaded, it's ready to go, here's the documents that we still are lacking on the agenda. So it really does help with that preparation piece.
Great. And how about SharePoint? Is that I believe we talked about that. That's document sharing kind of post-meeting, right? It's kind of the result of broader distribution.
Correct.
What would be an example of that?
Yeah, that's kind of where we hold all of our policies and procedures. so everyone knows that the one they are clicking on is the most current. They're not finding 4 different versions of something out on a, network drive somewhere. They know that if they click on the intranet site, on the SharePoint site, that it is the most current. And post-meeting, if we had, say, some procedures or some quick tips or other items, we provide those on the SharePoint site as well. That way, if a employee is helping a customer and they can't quite remember, oh yeah, what were we supposed to do in this case, they can jump out there, see those notes, and help the customer immediately and not have to get up and go ask someone for that information.
That's great. So it really, by combining these 3 tools, you've kind of got a nice process where you really use technology to improve the effectiveness and productivity of your meeting. You're using LifeSize from a communication perspective to bring everybody together, and adding the video conferencing just so you can have that increased communication and actually use some of the tools within that for collaboration. Then you have OnBoard to help drive your meeting. It's involved in preparation. There's some collaboration involved in OnBoard as well, along with some document sharing. But then after you have the meeting, you're immediately kind of exporting the results of the discussion and the voting and the decision process out to SharePoint for broader distribution to employees of your bank and perhaps even customers. Do I have that right?
Correct. You're exactly right.
Nice. That's a nice flow. Great. So let's talk a little bit about the different committees that are using these tools. And I think I'd first like to ask, is it a logical assumption to say that the board of directors was the start? They were the ones that kind of originated the combination of these tools together, and then based on that effectiveness, it was rolled out to other committees?
That would be correct. The board was the main driver in moving, especially with the OnBoard piece, because of the amount of paper that is entailed with board packages, as everyone knows. It was somewhat of a no-brainer as long as we, once we kind of talked with the board and determined whether there was buy-in on going digital, because you do have those, those people who prefer paper, but we actually had, really good adoption with it, and so they were the main driver as far as pulling in the OnBoard piece. And the video conferencing obviously was very much steered because of the board of directors, and as I mentioned, we have shareholders and directors in both of our markets. So they are the ones that really pulled in the OnBoard and LifeSize pieces. Those are pretty much the 2 pieces that go with every single meeting we have at this point, just because they work so well together. And at that point, we started filtering it down through the committees that made sense. The IT committee, obviously, there was fairly quick adoption with the people on that team. And loan committee, it obviously makes a lot of sense to get it into that committee as well. But as I mentioned in our previous discussion, we, take it all the way down to it's actually the operations team meeting is what we call it. It's not really a formal committee, but it literally includes all of our customer service reps, just to kind of level the playing field to make sure everybody knows what's going on, any new updates, any things we're trying to make sure our customers are aware of, or anything like that. We use OnBoard and LifeSize in those meetings as well, and then that information gets pushed out to SharePoint. And that's probably one of the best examples of how all 3 tools are used together, because those tips and quick help articles and things like that are on SharePoint are really useful for those CSRs that use them after the meeting.
Yeah. That makes sense. And, one of the things I think that I thought was really interesting, and once you mentioned it in our earlier conversation, it made perfect sense, is that even though originally the board brought in LifeSize and the other tools for their meetings, even bringing them down to non-committee, so, we did put committee rather than a meeting, but we talked about the ability to bring all your branches together through LifeSize as well. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Correct. Yeah, we have LifeSize at every one of our branches, and to be honest, anytime there's a discussion, other than a quick one-on-one phone call maybe, we use LifeSize for pretty much all of that communication, because it does bring in that, that in-room meeting, if you want to call it that, where it literally puts everybody together. You get to put a face, because some of our employees, they've never stepped foot in our other market, but they still are able to put a face with a voice and a name, and you're able to build a much more cohesive employee base than if you don't have those tools. So I think LifeSize has really helped to enhance our culture and just build a little more of that, employee cooperation and all of that. So I think it's done a great job.
Sure, that makes sense. And then you've already talked about SharePoint and that it's kind of been there for a while, right? That's kind of your de facto site
Correct.
for policy and maybe sales tools and different types of financial documents that are accessible to everybody. And then from an OnBoard perspective, how are these different committees using OnBoard?
Essentially, I mean, they're using them basically for agenda item meetings, if you want to put it that way, for sharing the information and just for making sure things stay on track, especially for the larger committees. It keeps things moving as opposed to getting stuck on an item. But the main thing is, the organization and the sharing capabilities for meetings.
And so does that mean that meeting attendees can upload documents to OnBoard so that there's kind of a central repository and everybody's on the same page, similar to your board of directors and holding company?
Yeah, we don't typically, not everyone can upload the documents. It's the people responsible for putting that agenda together, but there are several people doing that depending on the committee. SharePoint is typically what we use as far as that document repository function, kind of post-meeting or even on the fly, even if it doesn't entail a meeting, SharePoint to kind of share all of those documents and keep everyone on the same page.
Okay, makes sense. Great, thank you. Briefly, if you would, let's talk about some additional meeting productivity tools that we discussed that the Grand Bank is using. They're kind of ad hoc, but since this is just a general webinar on how we can use modern IT solutions to improve meeting productivity, can you chat a little bit about the four on the screen, how those are used on occasion, even if it's by an individual employee or group of employees?
Yeah, as far as GoToMeeting and WebEx, this meeting right here is or webinar is a great example as far as how our institution uses GoToMeeting and the WebEx functions when we're attending webinars or when we have a customer who might use those services. We also utilize them. OneNote, we do have several employees that, because it's part of the Microsoft Office suite, they utilize OneNote to kind of keep their individual notes. That way they're searchable and they're not having to sift through a bunch of paper on their desk or in one of their folders in their desk to be able to find notes that they'd written, 2, 3, 4 months ago or longer. They're able to search them and easily reference those. So OneNote is a great tool for that. Evernote, we don't use inside of our organization at this point. We have looked at that, but at this point we haven't made that step. But on a personal level, I can say I use it extensively. It's essentially a OneNote equivalent with there's a lot of differences there, but that's the closest thing I can associate it with. But it's a great tool, kind of a lot of the same functionalities as OneNote. Yeah,
and I use both of those myself, and I will say that I've been an Evernote user for many, many years, and the one thing I like about it is if I'm browsing the internet and see something of interest, it's very easy to just click it and archive a link so that I can look at that page in the future down the road without having to store all that in my history on my browser, because that gets very difficult. So yeah, all these tools are great in terms of driving productivity. We're getting ready to wind down the meeting. We're only going to go about 20-25 minutes. As you can tell, it's already been extremely productive, and Chad has given us a lot to think about and a lot of great ways to drive more productivity. As we wind up here, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them on the question bar. I've already gotten a couple, or you can also type those into the chat, and we'll try to get to those before we end. So, you know, I guess the last question I would ask you is, Chad, why is it important from an overall bank perspective to get more out of your meetings? I mean, I think I kind of led off by saying we all sometimes suffer from meeting fatigue, and it seems like there's too many and they go on too long. And so it's always great to be productive from that perspective. But more from a bank and a goal and a customer perspective, why is it important that your internal meetings, whether it's a board or holding company meeting or all the way through to your operations meeting where you have all of your associates in different roles, why is meeting productivity important for you and important for the Grand Bank of Texas?
Well, for us, I mean, it kind of boils down to, you know, what we're all about. And for our bank, it's, you know, being the best we can be for the customer and taking care of the customer. So, you know, obviously meetings are crucial. There's a lot of great things that come out of meetings that help customers, but you don't want to spend too much time in meetings because then you're not in front of your customer actually paying attention to them. So for us, we want to make those meetings, you know, as productive as possible, the shortest amount of time to allow that productivity, and then move on and actually get in front of our customer and find out what they need, what they want from us, and how to achieve those goals. So for us, it's about helping our customers and doing that through productive meetings, through not spending unneeded time in those meetings, which goes back to the organization of how you do those. And that's pretty much our main goal is you know, customer satisfaction and taking care of those that help us to do what we do.
Wonderful. Very, very well said. Well, listen, thank you very much. I got a couple questions I want to ask you, but thank you for giving us that great overview. Very impressive. So I have two questions. I think the first you kind of already answered, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. So the question is, how do you quantify the benefits of video conferencing versus audio conferencing? Video conferencing tends to cost significantly more than audio conferencing. So I think the question is, Chad, more around how much more do you feel you get by being able to see the attendees versus just hear them?
Yeah, and you know, for a numbers guy as myself, it is very hard to quantify literal numbers on that. You know, we looked at different research studies and things like that, which, you know, obviously a lot of them mention how productive it is versus just audio. However, it does come down to a perceived benefit in some regards. So I'm not going to sit here and say that we, you know, crunch the numbers exactly and all of that, because that, you know, it's just not really a way to do that. A lot of it had to do with past experiences in other committees and other organizations that some of our associates had, and it, you know, it just seemed like the easiest way to be able to make people feel like they were all part of one team. When you hear people on the phone, you can build a relationship in some regards, but when you see that person's face and see that person, you know, essentially right in front of you, even though it's across a video screen, you can definitely build a much more real relationship and be able to work a whole lot better moving forward.
Okay, very well said. Second question, I like this one. So how did you get your directors into embracing technologies such as video teleconferencing and onboard portal solutions? It says some board members tend to be a little bit older and not embrace technology as well, but it sounds like you were able to deploy quite a bit. How did you do that, Chad?
Well, you know, I will say, you know, we were fairly fortunate in some regards. For the most part, our board really adopted it very well. The video conferencing is pretty simple because they didn't actually have to do anything. Essentially, you know, one of our employees that's on the board, you know, they would, you know, dial up the connection, real simple, and then the board members, they just do what they normally do. So that's the easy piece. As far as OnBoard or any, you know, paperless meeting solution, That is a little bit trickier, but our main thing was when we first started deploying it, for the first couple of months, we actually did paper and onboard. That way, we didn't just kick them off in the deep end and say, you're going to do it because we told you you're going to do it. We somewhat babied them at first and gave them both options. Now, whenever we first did that, we did say, okay, we're going to do this for this month and next month, and the following month, you don't get paper anymore. So we did give them kind of a somewhat of a deadline, if you want to call it that. And for the most part, we just kind of held their hand and, went to the board meetings to kind of handhold and say, okay, well, how you're flipping through these papers and, it's taking you a minute to find this section. Well, here, let me show you how it's much more helpful and much more efficient over on this iPad that's sitting beside you. And, they quickly see the benefits of it. It still took a little bit of prodding, and I'm not going to lie and say, we have 0 people still using paper, because we do still, have 1 or 2 board members that they want to print it off and use paper. And if that's what they want to do, at least we've done our best, and we continue to kind of prod them a little bit to get that 1 or 2 to switch strictly to OnBoard. But it's at least helped us to keep from having to mail those packets and risk, that security in that regard. But I think overall it was actually more smooth than people thought it would be. Sometimes we don't give credit to some of our board members enough for being willing to accept change, and it's not always as bad as what we think it might be.
Well, great best practices, Chad. Chad, listen, I'm going to let you go. I know you got a lot to do today, but thank you very much for joining us today and having the conversation. It was great, very interesting, lots of good information for everybody.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
That's great. Everybody, if you'd like some more information on meeting productivity, I'd encourage you to go to the Passageways website. That's www.passageways.com. It's filled with blogs and webinars like this and downloadable documents all around effective meetings. Additionally, I would encourage you, if you care to look me up on LinkedIn. That's Paul Lockhart. It's a picture of me on the left, so you have a general idea of what I look like, since there's a number of Paul Lockharts. You'll find a number of different articles and posts that I can consistently and continuously update around how to have more effective meetings and how to use technology and different ways that we can improve collaboration within our organization and what the benefits of that are. So we're going to end it right there. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you all have a great day and get through to the weekend and have an enjoyable weekend. And everybody take care. Thanks a lot.